When I think about CMF, it's my association. It is, it's my, I would say it's a good foundation for me as a corporate grant maker to get access to the information that I need to do my job, and the information in terms of networking and the data that is needed. It was a critical piece of my company's philanthropy when we decided we wanted to start a foundation back in 1990. I joined the foundation in 92, so I came in just after everything got started. But it played such a huge role in helping us put all that together. I don't think we could have done it without it.
Specifically, what kinds of things did they do? What were the behaviors that were real helpful to you as a grant maker?
I think as a grant maker, it gives a structure that is so critical, and particularly in a corporate environment, that really makes a big difference in terms of its stature, and I think its acceptance within the corporate environment. It's a stamp of approval. It's like a good housekeeping stamp of approval. It really helps us to have a roadmap also for where to go. There's also a lot of opportunity to do things differently, but you'd like to do them within the guidelines of the rules and the law, and that's where CMF comes into play, and it's so important for us. I think it's critical that they do focus on the public policy. For me as a corporate grant maker, it's a little challenging because we have different interests and our corporation has policy interests. And so it's helpful for me as a foundation. The CMF carries that load because I can't ask my corporation to do that. The corporation has enough of its own interests and we try to utilize those. But for CMF, I think it's critical. The nonprofit sector needs to have a voice. And CMF is the foundation's piece is important because sometimes that voice is different from the other nonprofits in the state. So I think it's real important. M&A has been incredibly effective, but what I see such a strong partnership, and there's such a deep connection there. I don't think the two are able to function as effectively without one another. And now I'm coming onto the CMF board, which I'm excited to see that other side as well. But I see the intersections happen every single day. Going to Washington for many years on the annual trip to hit the hill and talk to our constituents in the delegation, it's important for them to hear the voice of the foundations, but also looking from the nonprofit side, what are those impacts? And those impacts are just so dramatic, they have to be connected. I think a lot of the relationships and the cross-pollination of the relationships, and you see a lot of the same people, or at least a lot of the same organizations and the representation there. The unified vision between the two organizations is helpful, but at the same time, M&A has its own distinct voice and its distinct mission and that's important. But the leadership there, when I think of individuals, and I think of their vision, and they always seem to be a step or two or three, much like CMF. They're ahead of where things tend to be headed, and that helps in such an important way for so many different reasons. They're always thinking about what's around the corner, not just dealing with the today, but always thinking about tomorrow and the next few days or the next few weeks or years. And I think that's real critical, particularly as things change so rapidly around here. I think one of the key pieces of that board is they've got representation from most of the key state organizations, and those seats are permanent. And the people that are in those positions, I remember when I was term limited and I was so disappointed to leave the board because I always learned something, that the people are of the most incredible quality. The thinking, the visioning, and the work that they do. And I think that's one of the reasons why that board's so effective. People are not hesitant to speak their mind. There's a very big, it's a great openness. There's some very great discussion. And because so many of the people on the board are on multiple boards themselves, they're thinking beyond just M&A, which I think makes a big difference because they see the bigger picture. And one of the more effective things that we've done, I think, in recent memory is we've always brought in one of the current programs. And there's been a a program moment where the program would describe what they've been doing. So we actually get to see what M&A is funding or see the work that we're doing, get to see the results, and that makes a big difference. It makes it real. I think it's very heartwarming to see. Sometimes people will say, I can't vote on this right now, I've got other interests. But they're very, I think, aware and cognizant of those differences and very deliberate in shaping the policy and making sure that all voices are heard. And I think that's where it's so effective. And that's where I think the deeply rooted understanding and knowledge comes into play. I am blown away consistently when we meet and we talk about the public policy and we talk about the different things that have been done and where we're headed. I am always just very, very impressed. I think it was set early on because I can't remember a time where it wasn't there, which is, I think, what made it so appealing to me. As soon as I got on the board, I realized this is where I really like to be. And I remember explaining to my leadership back at my company, telling them this board is so important for us to have a seat at this table because these people tend to see the entire landscape. There are not a lot of boundaries. The boundaries seem to be very open, and the openness tends to make more things happen. And it seems like through the tougher times that Michigan has faced, it's become even more important that everyone is working together toward the same goal. So I think I've seen it strengthen, but I've never seen it struggle. My experience with the league has been very interesting. It's been fun for me. I work and live in the Jackson area, and the Jackson Public Schools are a very strong league school. So I always sit with pride because we talk about what schools are doing and who's really excelling, and Jackson tends to excel quite a bit, and that's been quite fun for me to see. I think I'm a little frustrated as a league board member, however, because there's so much potential with this program. And it doesn't seem to be as popular as I think it could be. But a lot of that might be because of the educational challenges that the school districts face and they might not recognize. But being in Jackson, I know the superintendent well, and I know he gets what the league is about. And he's behind it 150%, which is why it works. And I see the impacts that it makes in the community, and so I get frustrated that we're not able to do more. It's an important project for so many reasons. I think getting young people involved in philanthropy in a different way. I don't think they see that it's philanthropy, it's just what they do. And that's the best way for them to learn because it becomes very natural and not intentional. And including it as part of their educational process, as part of the education. I had a wonderful conversation with Dr. Russ Mobby a couple weeks ago. We were talking about education and how it needs to be more than just reading and writing. We need to build these young people and their character and build them as people and as citizens, and that's what the league does. But without these kids understanding that's what they're doing, so it just makes it very natural for them. And I think it becomes more successful as a result of that. Quite an interesting little blur because they're all interwoven in some way. I see the commission more as actually the doing. The commission trying to make sure we mobilize the people to serve the nonprofits and make good use of the money that the foundations have invested in the state. So I kind of see that in that way. Well, the CMA endowment, very fascinating to say the least. And I have to say, my corporate foundation does not contribute to endowments. And so I was doing cartwheels down the hallway when we actually contributed. I'm sure that probably won't be in the clip. That visual will be a little too scary. The CMA endowment, such a powerful statement. I think the reason that worked was the state's commitment and the governor's commitment. Right up front, it never would have happened without that. There's absolutely no question. From a business perspective, as coming from a corporate foundation, the math worked for us. It just seemed to make such great sense. Leveraging other foundations, putting all of that together, seeing the power of collaboration like this state has not seen before, and this is that future vision again. And it's not just from the foundation leaders or the nonprofit sector. Then you've got state government coming in, and they're seeing that vision. And I think that's something that even my state utility executives said, this makes great sense for us to invest in. We really need to be part of this as well. I just remember being invited to a meeting with Kyle Caldwell and Sam Singh, which you knew was going to be fun, because those two young men were always thinking ahead, always thinking ahead. And so I just remember being invited and them saying, we'd like to do this, we'd like you to be part of it, and it's really tough to say no to them. Really, really tough. And then seeing the rest of the cabinet that was put together, I mean, it was a blue ribbon cabinet. It was an honor to be part of that. It really was.
So partly it's the people who were brought together.
Oh, the people, just phenomenal people. And I think that's the one thing that is consistent among all the lines of all of these organizations. The people are some of the very best people this state has. And it is a real privilege to work and serve with each of them. The quality of their character, their deep passion for Michigan and seeing Michigan grow and prosper is so appealing. Positive energy, a real can-do attitude, can-do spirit, and I think a love for their field. It tends to really make you want to be as in love with what you're doing as they are. It's been a challenge for the commission. Federal funding cuts have been just brutal, absolutely brutal. So a lot of the programs the commission supports have been cut dramatically because of the federal budget cuts. And now the state budget cuts impacted us as well. We're part of the Department of Human Services. And it's not a real large budget. It's a $600,000 budget, which leverages several $1 million in federal funds. But it's under question often and consistently, and we need to continually prove our value and our worth. And it's been a bit of a challenge. I think we need to continue to try to show measurable results for what we're doing. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Everyone has to do that, and that's not a bad thing, and I know that's something we can do. But it makes it very tough when it's such a difficult time for everybody on top of all of this. It's a tough time for our volunteers. It's a tough time for the agencies when they're strapped to be able to deliver what they need to do. But there's no question that we're committed to continue to fight for that. We have a new director in the Department of Human Services, Maura Corrigan. She attended our board meeting last month, and she's very committed to us, which is exactly what I think the commission needed to hear. And we've got a number of new commissioners coming on that I think are going to bring a lot of energy and enthusiasm. And we just need to continue to educate people in the state for the value of volunteerism and what it brings and what it can do, particularly when other areas are down. People can pick this up. I think business expects philanthropy to be operated as a business. I think we look at a lot of the nonprofits that we support and want to make sure their bottom line is strong. We need to make a good investment in them. But what I also think about is the fact that many of our business leaders in Michigan, particularly many at my company, are actively involved in the nonprofit sector. They're actively involved on foundations. They serve on many, many boards, many of our nonprofit leaders themselves. So there's a real important intersect there. But I think we expect the nonprofit community to be able to hold themselves up, just like a business. Obviously, their mission is different. Their passion is going to be a little bit different, but the bottom line is there's money involved, and they need to run it wisely. And so for a business to be able to make an investment in them, we need to have them be as strong as they possibly can. You know, I was thinking, I saw one of the questions, and I was trying to imagine what would it be like when I think about the leaders here in the state. And I think of Dottie Johnson, and I think of Rob Collier. And I remember the transition from Dottie to Rob thinking, oh my, they're such different people. But what I found is I'm just overwhelmed and awed by what they've been able to achieve. I think about Rob and working with Kyle Caldwell and Sam Singh and Paula Kaiser Van Dam, and I think about the ability of all of those leaders they take their stripes off when they get into a room. You can't tell who belongs to which organization. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why Michigan's sector is so strong. And they are all looking out for one another. That's the one thing that I consistently hear. And now being on all of these boards, I see it. In each board meeting, I see it. They deeply care, and they are rooting for each other. When they go to Washington, they're not just wearing the M&A hat or the CMF hat. They are wearing the hat of Michigan. And that, I think, is what makes this such a great success. And I'm just real pleased to be part of it. My first memory of philanthropy is walking up and down my street in Jonesville, Michigan with my mom as she raised money for the March of Dimes. It's a very small, tiny glimmer. I had to be about 5 or 6, going door to door. I remember that. I don't know why I remember that, but I remember that. But grew up in a small town and had just a wonderful life. My parents were very actively involved in the community. They own a newspaper. So I come deeply rooted from newspaper roots. Yes, that's right. So they were actively involved in the community. And so philanthropy was just a natural part of my life. It was part of that league type of experience where I didn't realize what I was doing. Just got involved in a lot of things, supporting whatever was going on. Went to work at the utility as a college student here in Kalamazoo, and bounced around different departments as I grew and as I finished school, and just kind of landed in a job to work for the foundation. Just they had to actually talk me into it. They had already set it up, and I already been with the company for a long time, and they had to convince me to take the job because I loved the job I was doing within the company. At that time, I had a brand new position. We had an employee suggestion program. So I'm driving around the state and meeting with employees. I was having a ball. And I'd been in a number of different other roles within Consumers Energy. So they had to convince me because they had purposely made this move unbeknownst to me. So okay, I'm in this job and I'm starting to work on the foundation, I'm helping out. And that was probably about 1992. So fast forward, here we are about 20 years later. I'm thinking, what was I thinking? Why did I not just fight for that job? Yeah. But I've been, my job has grown, and I've kind of grown and developed into the position. I've been running the foundation since about 1997, I would say. We're a small corporate foundation, but our company used to have international interests. So at one point in time, I was supporting not only Michigan, but I think 17 other states and 21 other countries. So I've had an opportunity to do a little bit of international giving, and that was an experience. So what did I do? I called CMF and asked CMF, I need some help. What do I do? I've got to do international grants. We've never done this before. What do I do? And also reached out to my corporate colleagues that I had met through CMF. Went over to Dearborn, sat down with our friends at Ford, and said, "Please help us figure this out." So the CMF was really key in helping as we grew, because we grew as a foundation pretty dramatically over the years, and it's really ebbed and flowed since that time. And we had some down years, and so a lot of times I'd call Rob, what do I do? And he'd help me, talk me through it. The resource has been pretty incredible. It's funny, there are a lot of projects that hit me, but what I think I'm most proud of, we have made a commitment at Consumers Energy to support youth. When America's Promise was being formed and developed, and Colin Powell and all of that, we had made a commitment to double all of our volunteer grants. So any of our employees that are involved with children in any capacity, coaching, tutoring, mentoring, we would double those grant awards. And originally it just sounded like something we might do. Well, here we are 20 years later. We're still doubling those grants. Our commitment to youth is still very, very strong. And when I look back and I think about what I've been able to accomplish and what I've been able to do, that I think is one of those issues and impacts that have been, I think, the most meaningful. It's not one grant, it's not one community, it's everywhere. We have 8,000 employees at my company, so 8,000 employees have an ability to impact youth that way, and so that to me is very meaningful. I mean, it didn't hurt meeting Colin Powell. That was pretty nice. Brought him into town. But there are also a number of other projects. Every grant is special in its own way. I think whenever we're able to dramatically make a difference in a particular community, and each community has such different needs. It's one of the benefits of my job is I'm not just supporting one community. It's not just Jackson. I've got Muskegon, I've got Tawas, Flint, Traverse City, Kalamazoo. I mean, every community is different, and seeing what we can do in each of those communities, and a lot of times it's not a large grant, but it's enough to make a difference. And that's been very, very rewarding, to go out and meet the people that we're able to impact, maybe see a building that we helped to construct, maybe meet some of the youth that are being served or some of the people, or going out and seeing our employees who utilize a facility, or maybe somebody serves on a board, and our employees, their pride and their happiness because their company supported something they care about. That's been pretty terrific. When I first started working with the foundation, I hadn't really thought about my childhood and what I had done growing up and being involved in the community and things like that. And then as I kind of grew into the job and got to make it more of my own and got to put a little bit more of my stamp of what's important and what I think it's important for the company to be doing, I think it really helped me and helped remind me where my roots were. My mom passed away a year ago, and I got thinking. We were thinking about, her life and what does she do, and I got thinking about what I've done, and I don't think I meant to be emotional here, but when you talk about changing you, that's the impact. Helping people. People talk about foundation work. Oh, you have the great job. Everybody at Consumers thinks I have the best job. Your job is great. You're giving away money. Yes, it is great, but I also have to tell people no, and that's tough. That's real tough. I've learned and I've tried real hard to make sure that people understand that it's not a personal no, and we want to help them, but we don't have a great deal of money, and I want their journey to be just as good all throughout it and at the end, even at the beginning. But I think it's important to help people and help them understand what they've been able to accomplish. We've built a lot of buildings, a lot of capital campaigns. I mean, that's kind of cold. But trying to demonstrate what that building's able to do. Are they able to now serve food because they weren't able to before because their kitchen wasn't big enough? Or maybe we helped build a ramp because people in a wheelchair weren't able to get inside to be served. So just trying to make that personal, and it becomes very personal. We work a lot with some youth groups. The Michigan FFA is one of my favorites. Have been supporting those kids for a long time, and they're my kids now. They are my kids. They send me Christmas cards, and they keep in touch with me on Facebook and tell me how they're doing. And that's important. It's all about the people. It gets real personal real quickly. And sometimes that makes it tough. It makes it real tough. We get about 1,200 requests a year, and I have to separate myself. I'm real strategic. I probably learned this through M&A or CMF. I don't meet with everybody personally, because as soon as I meet them, it's over for me. I can't disconnect. I just can't. So yeah, I'm real careful about who I meet with now. Yeah. I think the biggest lesson for me is you have to be real deliberate in your thinking, but you also have to be very open. The one thing I have learned is my eyes have been opened quite a bit in this job, in this role. And listen 10 times more than you speak. That is such an important lesson to learn. And the more you listen, the more you see. Your ears, I think, are a much better window onto what's happening. And to be flexible. And always embrace what's going to come, because everything seems to change on a daily basis. And if you're not going to embrace those opportunities to meet that change, it's going to be a very challenging job ahead.